Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our town hall. We're going to wait just a couple more minutes. Let's a few minutes go by and get more individuals to join us, and then we will go from there. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. I'm Christina Turner, the city manager for Morgan Hill, and tonight we're going to talk about our budget as well as water rates. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I do have with me tonight our leadership team, and I just want to specifically call out tonight Dat Nguyen, our finance director, as well as Monica Delgado, our budget manager. And there's Monica. And like I said, we have all the members of our leadership team here just in case there's department specific questions. And so with that, I'm going to share my screen to the PowerPoint. And so if you can give me a thumbs up, Monica, if you see it. Awesome. Okay, great. Let's get it in presentation mode here. Okay, so tonight for the budget portion of this, what are we going to cover? Well, we're going to look at sustainable Morgan Hill. And so that's the council adopted goals and priorities. We're going to talk about fiscal sustainability, and that's where our focus is. That's one of council's strategic priorities. Council has 5 strategic priorities, and fiscal sustainability continues to be council's priority. And then we'll talk about funding priorities for local government. We'll talk about our budget process. We'll provide a budget update. And then we'll look at the forecast for the general fund. So first, just to spend a little bit of time about sustainable Morgan Hill. So council meets really every 6 months to look at sustainable Morgan Hill, our goals and visions document. And then every year in January is really the longer day and a half really look at this document. And so council met at the end of January to look at the priorities and to see if any of these priorities needed to be changed. This first slide here shows our ongoing priorities. And so these are priorities that really aren't intended to change a whole lot from year to year. But once again, council does look at them, validate them, and makes any sort of changes that they deem needed. This particular year, the third bullet, it has been updated. And so it's now maintaining and enhancing infrastructure. Previously, it was just maintaining infrastructure, and council thought it was important to add the word and the concept of enhancing. So not only do we want to take care of and maintain and keep it at its current status, but let's enhance our infrastructure, and so that's our roads and our streets and buildings and everything that's infrastructure. So that was a change, and then everything else carried forward. Now, the next slide is strategic priorities. And so the council looks at this really with a 2-year focus in mind. So this is calendar 22 and 23, and these strategic priorities are the same since the last sustainable Morgan Hill document. These continue to be council's priorities. So once again, fiscal sustainability, affordable housing and homelessness, community outreach, engagement and messaging, economic development, and transportation. So the goal setting is really important for the council and for the community each year, and looking at it every 6 months, because in this case, it really sets the stage for the development of our 2-year budget. And so it sets the foundation. And so we want to make sure that we are looking and focusing on our priorities as we put together the budget. So council adopts the priorities, and then we make sure that we have the dollars behind each of these priorities. So let's look at some dates for the budget. And so we're on a 2-year budget cycle. And so we're going to be working on the budget for the upcoming 2 fiscal years. Our city starts with July 1st as the beginning part of our fiscal year. And so our current cycle runs through June 30th. So council goal setting, as I mentioned, January 28th and 29th, that's done. And tonight is our budget community town hall. And then the next step is our Parks and Recreation Commission meeting. So they review the CIP, really focusing on their areas related to Parks and Recreation. And so that's going to be next month, April the 19th. And then also our Planning Commission reviews the CIP. And this is the capital side of the budget. And what are they looking at? Well, they have a specific scope, what the Planning Commission does. And so they're looking at the capital projects to make sure that what we're bringing forward and recommending conforms with the already adopted general plan. And so that happens next month on April 26th. So just a few days after that, we're going to be releasing the recommended budget to the community and to the council. And then what we typically do is just shortly after the release at the next city council meeting, in this case on May 4th, we'll bring forward the recommended budget to city council. And so that's an introduction of the budget. We'll walk through the format, the layout, the content of the budget on that evening. And then we'll follow that up 2 weeks later with a budget community town hall. So be on the lookout for that and how to get involved in that. And then we do a budget workshop, and that's going to be on Wednesday, May 25th. And then the last step is the actual adoption. And so that requires a public hearing, and that will happen on June 15th. Okay, so I said the next thing that we're going to look at is looking at priorities for local government and looking at what different entities take care of and what their focus is. And so the left-hand side of this is the city. And this is just cities in general. What are cities supposed to, and what are the general services that cities provide? And of course, this varies from city to city, but generally speaking, it's municipal services to cover police, fire, animal control, parks, public works, water and wastewater, solid waste, community services, and general governance. And that looks different from city to city. Some cities contract out for certain services. Sometimes there's districts instead of the city providing those services directly. Cities also are in charge of regulations. And so that's in the land of land use, building codes, and so forth. Now, how is that different than what the county does? Well, the county's one of their number one service areas is welfare and social services. So most of their funds go towards that, as well as the courts and criminal justice system, municipal services, and regulations for the unincorporated areas. And so that's what's considered local government. And then of course, the state has their own areas where their funding goes to, and then of course, the federal government. And so each agency really has their areas that they take care of. Now, let's talk about the concept of discretionary revenue. So certain revenues, the council has really discretion or the ability to determine how funds are going to be spent. So how is it defined? Well, resources that are not legally restricted for certain uses and can be allocated based on council's priorities. So generally speaking, tax revenue, such as property tax, sales tax, hotel, and business license, as well as the general fund's unrestricted fund balance. And so when it comes to these areas, there's discretion on how to spend that revenue. Now, the very opposite of discretionary, non-discretionary relates to other sort of funds. So for instance, if we receive a grant, so that grant comes in as revenue, those funds are earmarked for whatever project is being funded by that grant. Similarly, if we collect, say, development impact fees, there's certain things that have to be spent with those funds. The council can't decide how those funds get spent. So this is revenue that the council can allocate as it wishes to fund local priorities. And so let's look at some specifics. So funding for municipal services and by funding source. So first, if we look at public safety, police, generally speaking, it's funded through taxes and it flows through the general fund. Now, of course, there's other sort of stuff out there. We may get a police grant, and that's not considered a tax, but the lion's share is really taxes in the general fund. Same thing with fire. If we look at pavement rehabilitation, so several different sources allow us to cover and take care of our pavement. So everything from our gas taxes to regional sales tax to our city general fund. So we transfer money from our general fund to take care of our pavement rehab to supplement gas taxes and regional sales tax. In addition to that, another area that we want to look at, parks and street maintenance. How does that get funded? Through statewide gas tax, as well as the city general fund. Water and wastewater. So these are what's considered enterprise funds. And so the funds come in through user fees. And so those user fees are collected to provide the services for which those fees are collected. So water and wastewater in this case. And so it's fees that are providing that funding source. And then lastly, solid waste through the franchise. And once again, fees, not taxes here. And just a quick break from the slide for a moment. I just want to let everybody know that we will have the opportunity to have questions at the end of the presentation, as well as we want to get comments, questions, any input from the community as well. And Michelle, would you just share how that can be done?
For those members that have joined us tonight, you can raise your virtual hand to ask a question verbally. For those folks that are calling in, you can raise your hand by dialing *9, and when prompted to unmute, you can dial *6 to unmute. For the folks that have joined Zoom on their computer or tablet, we also have the Q&A feature on, so you can type your questions in there, and then our team can review and address them. And then for anybody that might have a question later, you can email our finance director, datnwen@morganhill.ca.gov. And if you just go to our website and go to finance, you can email our finance team there, so you don't have to remember that email address right now.
Thank you, Michelle. And this is being recorded, so we'll share this on our website as well. Okay, so what are some of the other services that we fund through the general fund? Environmental services, recreation. And so in general, this fund is, this area is non-cost recovery. So let me back up for a second. So we have certain areas where we collect fees that cover the cost of the services. But if we look at, say, the senior center and the teen center, there's some level of subsidy, and that's a council priority that we would provide these services, where the fee doesn't fully cover the cost of providing that service. And then development services, there's some non-cost recovery areas, things like when we have people come to the public counter where they actually haven't submitted an application, providing just general information services, strategic initiative and special projects, as well as subsidized services. So once again, these are captured and paid for by the general fund. Economic development is another area, and then community promotions and partner organizations. And so this is when the city is providing funds to outside agencies, nonprofits to carry on, their, in most cases, special events. Okay. All right, so what does the budget calendar look like, and where are we at in it? So I mentioned that we do a 2-year budget, and if we start at the very top, if we think of this as a clock, 12 o'clock here, January of the first year, we do the goal setting workshop. And if we go clockwise here, right now we're in the midst of budget development. And so that generally occurs, the bulk of it, between February and April each year. And then if we keep moving clockwise, we show April, the recommended budget is made available to the public. And so that's at the end of April. And then we do our budget workshop in May, and then the hearing in June. And then the cycle keeps going. And then in January of the second year, we again hold a council goal setting workshop. And then we roll into the February to June, where we aren't putting together a full budget because we're in that second year. And so most of the time is spent validating the revenue and expenditure assumptions that were made at the time of putting together the 2-year budget. And so what that means is looking at the revenue assumptions. Were the assumptions that we made about, say, the increase or decrease in revenue categories, are they accurate? Is it consistent with what we're seeing on the expenditure side? Are we seeing inflation go up more than we anticipated? Are contractual services going up? Are there any unforeseen items that we need to take care of? And so then what goes to council is a mid-cycle update, and then we present any sort of budget adjustments that might be needed. And so then council would look at those, and then we repeat the cycle once again every 2 years. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the general fund and looking at, big picture on where we're at for this budget cycle. So first, tax revenue is increasing. And so we talk about taxes, the primary categories we're talking about are sales tax, property tax, transient occupancy tax, which is basically TOT, hotel tax. And so we are seeing an increase in tax revenue. So sales tax certainly went down, and you'll see that in a subsequent chart with COVID. However, sales tax is recovering, which is excellent news. Now, property tax has just maintained being steady. We haven't seen a decrease in our property tax. Transient occupancy tax, on the other hand, we saw a pretty dramatic decrease. It's building back up, but hotels were really just hit probably one of the hardest industries because travel came to just basically a halt. And then business travel started again, and then recreation travel started again, but it's going to take a while to pick back up. Recreation revenue is gradually restoring to pre-COVID levels. We have a very robust recreation program, and COVID got in the way of memberships and people coming because we weren't able to keep the gym open. And but however, our crew was certainly very innovative, in looking at the county's restrictions and what was allowed, and really, we took the equipment, moved it outside, we did online things, and so we were able to keep a membership. However, it just wasn't at the levels that we had previously seen, but with no longer having the masks inside, we're gradually going to continue to get back to pre-COVID levels and then just do well from there. On the expenditure side, we're seeing and putting together the budget. Our expenditures are increasing, and so primarily is inflation, and this isn't probably a surprise to anyone on this call. Inflation is just skyrocketing, as well as just contractual increases. And so, what does this look like? Well, utilities, so that's electricity, seeing increasing electricity costs, and then gas prices, in fueling our fleet. Looking at everything from maintenance costs and contracts to our capital projects, just bids are coming in higher than anticipated. And so this certainly has a significant impact on the budget. In the upcoming budget that we're continuing to work on, we will be proposing to increase public safety services. And so we'll talk about in the slide upcoming our unfunded liabilities, which at this point are primarily police and fire. And so what we're trying to do is to see how we can add staffing and resources for police. And then for fire, what that means is staffing a third fire station. And then the last bullet here is continued conservative spending. We're coming out of COVID and we're in recovery mode. And so it's imperative that our spending continue to be conservative. And so that's both, in how we spend our money when the budget is established, after the budget is established, but not only that, just in establishing the budget, our process isn't to just take last year's or baseline pre-COVID and add an inflator and then go from there and get that adopted. No, we do a line by line by line, and so every line item is looked at and through the lens of conservative spending. All right, so we wanted to just spend a little time on some of the revenue categories. In this case, this slide shows property tax, and so at the top you'll see years from fiscal year 18 through the forecast year of the recommended budget year of fiscal year 23. These are preliminary numbers. This is where we're at right now. This will can change by the time that we're ready to actually release the budget document. What you can see in the illustration there is our share of the property tax distribution. So generally speaking, if we look at the 1% that's paid on assessed valuation, the city of Morgan Hill receives 10% of that 1%. So we don't receive everything, but it's definitely divvied out between all of the different agencies and districts that are at the bottom. Sales tax, you can see the same years at the top. And so you can see that by fiscal year 23, we're forecasting to be at 12.4 million, which is higher than pre-COVID levels. And then the illustration here shows that if we look at the 9.125% tax rate, we receive 1%, a 1% share. And this next slide shows recreation services. And so you can see that it dropped in fiscal year 21 to an all-time low in this period anyway of 3.2 million, but climbing back up, as we bring on new members that, may have fallen off during COVID, and just enhance our programs. And you can see a couple other bullets here. One is facility rental fees. The next is membership fees and classes. And so, with the restrictions being reduced, we're starting to see more rentals, and then just, more classes that we're able to offer. And just a quick plug for Chris's recreation group, the activity guide is available with a lot of programs. And so I think people are starving for activities and fun things to do. So please check out our rec guide. So this is our hotel tax. And so this is 11%. And so once again, this is on hotel stays. We receive 100% of this. So this is not shared with other agencies or entities. So we went down to 1.3 million for last fiscal year, and we will be slowly rebuilding this number. So this slide is a representation of our revenue loss from COVID. And so this dates back to fiscal year 1920. So March 2020 was when we, were impacted by COVID. And so in that first year, which is just a few months, a drop of 4.4 million. And then the most was lost, of course, last year, 7.3 million. So this totals 20.3. This is increased from what has been previously provided, which was closer to about 17 million. So once again, this is the revenue loss from COVID. All right, so I mentioned unfunded general fund unfunded needs. And so this is something that we've been sharing during our monthly financial updates that DAP provides, looking at budget to actuals. And so 4.6 million is the number that the community and council has seen most recently. And so 2.3 of that is fire, and then 1.3 of that is police, and then the operational loss from our residential development control system going away as a result of state legislation of $1 million. And so I won't go into each of these lists, but you can see the 4 bullets of, what sort of funding we receive that we're not getting anymore. Now, if we look at fire and police, as I previously mentioned, as we're putting together the recommended budget, the goal would be to see how we can work our way towards reducing these unfunded needs, which translates into providing staffing at our 3rd fire station once it's built, and then for police, additional staff as well as equipment. So this chart, I wanted to just mention what this represents. So this line graph goes from 2021 through the forecast year of 27-28. This is also something we present when we do our budget updates. And so you can see the green line. And so that's the general fund 6-year forecast as of right now. And so our council minimum level of general fund reserve, so kind of think of money in the bank for the general fund, is at 15%. So that's the red line. The orange represents the goal. So the goal is to be above 25%. So you can see that right now, the way the forecast is, we stay above the 25%, in the forecast window. Now, the blue line that shows the steep decline is, when we put in all of our unfunded needs, and so that drops to 5% by the last year. And so what we're working on now in the recommended budget is something sort of in between there, where we start to address our unfunded needs while keeping in mind council's general fund reserve policy. Okay, I just have a couple more items that I wanted to mention before I turn it over to talk about the water rate study. We are going to, at our upcoming meetings, talk a little bit more about capital, but I just wanted to mention a few things about capital. So we present to the council 6 years of capital. Since we do a 2-year budget, we always want to have 5 years available. So in that second year, we'll have 5 years of capital. And so this particular slide breaks it out by project categories. And so you can see our full capital improvement program over the 6 years that we're looking at $217 million. And you can see the biggest amount in wastewater. And so in this next slide, we show what are some of the projects. Well, the first one is the wastewater treatment plant. And so we have a sewer treatment plant in Gilroy. So it's a joint ownership between Gilroy and Morgan Hill. And that wastewater plant needs to be expanded. And this has been in the works for years. And finally, we're at the point now where it will be expanded. And so we've put aside money And we also will have debt to cover that. And so that's one of our biggest projects over the next few years, building the third fire station, street pavement rehabilitation, and then the Yagas flood control. That's just a snapshot of a few of our big projects, but more to come on what we're going to be recommending for our capital program. All right, so enterprise funds. So our current year wastewater operation revenue is tracking slightly higher than budget with no major changes in the upcoming budget. Our current year water sales revenue is below budget, and that's due to our drought measures. And as we mentioned, part of this town hall tonight is to talk about our water rates. And so we are going to be proposing rate adjustments. And so you're going to hear more about those. All right, so I am now going to turn it over and we're going to spend some time talking about water rates, and then we'll have time for questions and input from the community.
All right, thank you, Christina. Good evening, everyone, community members and teammates. My name is Dat Wayne, Pricing Director. I'll be presenting and discussing the water rates adjustment that we just completed. The overview of tonight is to talk about the background, the rationale, the reason for the water rate adjustment, and talk a little bit about the water system master plan, and delve into the proposed water rates adjustments. Next, please. Some of the background, the last water rate or comprehensive water rate study was done back in 2015. And the last water rates that we adjusted is back in January 1st, 2020. So basically it's over 2 years since we had a water rate adjustment. And back in December of last year, the council adopted water system master plan, which identifies about 108 million in capital improvement costs, and of which 49 million is to be paid by existing users. And of course, currently right now, we're going to discuss tonight is the water rate study. Next, please. The water system master plan. The master plan indicates that there are resiliencies programs for existing users, such as new wells, replace and repair existing pipes, as well as renovation and repair of aging reservoirs. Other words mentioned in here is the cost of the capital improvements that has increased dramatically. Taking the cost of constructing new wells, as example, it costs about twice as much now than about 5-6 years ago when we did the last master plan. And as identified in the master plan, the cost of the growth will be paid by the new users through impact fees. Next, please. We mentioned the increase in capital improvements costs. Operationally, the cost of utility has increased significantly as well. We also have seen a high inflationary cost for supplies, chemicals, and basically everything else in between. I think we all can relate to this. In addition, we have been informed and expected the increase in groundwater charges from Valley Water. This is a commodity cost that we pay to Valley Water for the amount of water we pump from the aquifer. Next, please. This table shows the overall proposed increase in water rates for the next 5 years. Note that percentage increase you see here, which is about 9% for next 2 years and 7% for the next following 2 years, and 3% increase for the proposed 5-year rate period. The percentage increase you see in here is a total rate revenue, with the individual rates vary from this percentage. Next, please. Here you can see the bill comparison as illustration for a single family residential bill for fiscal year 22-23 compared to the current rate and proposed rate. For the average monthly bill for a family, single family of 14 water unit or 1,400 cubic feet, currently that household would pay about $67.12. With the proposed rate for next year, that single family household would pay about $73.51. So that's an increase of about $6.39. Next, please. And this slide here also illustrates another bill comparison for a single family water consumption of about 14 water unit currently that single family would pay $67.12 for the average of 14 watt unit. And the next 5 years, you expect that, assume that water consumption remain the same at 14 watt unit, that household would pay about $73.51 for next fiscal year. And through the 5-year period, on the 5th year, 26, 27, that household would pay about $94.49. Now, as compared to our surrounding cities, I mentioned here, we illustrate in this slide, is the city of Gilroy, San Jose, and the city of Santa Clara, as well as Peters. Currently, Gilroy pay equivalent the same as the city of Morgan Hill, but noted that the city of Gilroy is also currently undergoing a rate study. Next, please. This slide shows the cash balance and reserve. You can see right now, currently under the 3 reserve funds that we have the operational water operational reserve, system replacement reserve, and water rate stabilization reserve. We have about $14 million. The green chart illustrates the level of cash reserve through 2030, and the blue line illustrates the recommended minimum reserve target. Even with the assumed that proposed rate increase for next 5 years, the city expect to dip or tap into the reserve and don't expect the reserve to be built up or to increase until the 2028. Next, thank you. This slide right here is the revenue stabilization rate. This is something new for us. The intent is to offset the revenue loss and to ensure that we have enough resources to safely operate and maintaining water system if there's a drastic reduction in consumption, whether through our choice or state mandated or regional or local mandated water consumption. The rate we will base on volumetric consumption of 3 years average, starting with a 10 or more reduction in water consumption compared to 3 years average with 5% increment up to 30% reduction in water consumption compared to 3 years average. This slide here shows the additional cost per unit if we're going to implement the revenue stabilization rate. As an illustration, our latest water consumption in January shows that we use about 1%, actually 1% more than a 3-year average. So the revenue stabilization rate won't be implemented. But if you look back in the October 2021, our water consumption was about 18% lower than 3 years average. Since it is higher than the 15% level, but lower than the 20%, so we would implement the 15% level. So the additional cost here at the 15% level means that in next year, assumption that in October of next year, we're going to charge additional 51 cents for each water unit. In this case, it costs about $7.14 more per month for an average single family household that consumes 14 water units. Next, please. Another slide about revenue stabilization rate. On the top row, you see the 5 years and currently proposed 5-year rate period of water unit of $2.89 per water unit to 26-27 of $3.71 at currently proposed rates. If the water consumption is reduced by 10% next year, for instance, the volumetric cost will be $3.21. And if we somehow have to reduce water consumption by 30%, for next year, the unit cost would be $4.12. And through 26-27, that cost would increase to $5.60 per unit. Another bill comparison with revenue stabilization rate. Here is an illustration of the currently proposed rate, current rates, and the 5-year schedule. Currently proposed, we currently a single family residential household consume about 14 water units or 1,400 cubic feet per month. Currently, that household would pay $67.12 as we discussed earlier. But with the revenue stabilization rate, example for 10%, In 22-23, that household would pay $78.04. And through the 5-year period of 26-27, if the water consumptions remain at 10% below the 3 years average, that household would pay $103.80. But that somehow we have consumed about 30% less than the 3 years average, the maximum that household would pay, we have to pay, assume that household consume about 14 water units, and that household would pay $120.94 per month. And this is, I also saw the table beneath it is the illustration compared to other 4 cities around the Morgan Hill. Franklin Business, for example, they currently pay $135.77 for their 14 water unit a month for a single family. Even with the highest possible rate that the city have to implement, with the revenue stabilization rate at 30%, the city of Morgan Hill resident household consume 14 water unit would pay $120.94, which is still less than the most expensive one in our neighbor. Next, please. The next step is for after tonight meeting is we ask the council to adopt resolution to declare the intent to implement the proposed rates, as well as commence the Prop 218 notices and set public hearing date. And the public hearing date will be June 1st. That's where the city clerk will tabulate all the final Proposition 18 protest letter. If no majority protest letter received, where we're talking about 50% plus 1, the staff will recommend the council to adopt the resolution, approve the recommended rate. New rates will become effective for water consumption beginning July 1st, 2022, with billing date beginning August 16th. And that concludes our presentation, and I'll turn over to Prisoner to take the questions.
Thank you, Dat. All right, so now we have our Q&A and our input time from community. So you can either raise your virtual hand. You can also use the Q&A feature. We would be happy to answer any questions, and we would love to also hear your input. And Michelle, if you want to help navigate through that.
Absolutely. At the moment, I'm not seeing any hands go up.
We'll just wait a couple minutes. All right, I do see.
Okay, here we go. We have Fran.
Hi, thank you both. Those were great pieces of information. My question is more about a generic question about the water billing.
Mm-hmm.
The units are so small. What happens if someone is between 13 and 14 or between 14 and 15, so that you can either what's going to bump you into another, whatever the unit is called? Is there a way to know that in real time?
Dat?
Yes, I think if you go to your water smart online information and your billing, you can have I believe up to the hour your water consumption for the month.
So meaning that you can sort of see, what your consumption patterns look like. And this tool, also helps sort of like if there's a leak or any sort of variation, it will alert you. And so if you're not already signed up, that can be done through our website. Now, Dat, are you able to real time provide information on how that works between, say in her example, 13 and 14, how that works, or is that something we would need to get back with Fran about? Did you hear that, Dat?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So while Dat I think, is looking that up. I'm going to just share my screen again. And so here's on our website. So I just typed in WaterSmart. And so this is a tool that we have. So it's software. And so you can sign up and, see your usage. And it's a very effective tool. And, the notifications and email alerts that I mentioned. And you can click on this to learn more about it. You can email the utility billing department for questions on it. And then just here's sort of other information. And while I'm on this page, if people aren't already signed up for online billing, highly, highly recommend it. Makes things easy, go paperless. You can still get your billing inserts, with information. Dat, anything further?
No, I currently do not know whether you could tell what between, if there's a small incremental change between, I would say between 13 and 14 or 14 and 15, because that will be by monthly. You would see that in the bill, but on the, as I mentioned, you can have the up-to-date water consumption through the period, up to the hour, but it probably won't tell you, what the total monthly bill units consumption would be until the month is closed.
Fran, if you can email our city clerk, we can follow up with any other detailed information for you. Michelle, do you mind just reading off your email address again?
Of course. So you can email cityclerk@morganhill.ca.gov. And I'd be happy to direct it to any of our departments. So if your question is, again, about our utility billing, it can be about any of our city processes. I'm happy to make sure you get in touch with the right teammates. And with that, Christina, looks like we have a question in the Q&A.
Okay. Back to that screen. Okay, so Nick Gage, Dat, Christina, thank you for your presentation. Can you review the timeline leading up to council adoption of the recommendation? Absolutely. So I'm going to pull up the calendar again. So we'll look at the budget key dates. Let's see here. Share my screen. So once again, we will go to the Parks and Recreation Commission in April, as well as the Planning Commission. We release the budget on April the 29th. And so at the May 4th council meeting, we will be introducing the budget. We'll have a community town hall on May 18th, a budget workshop on May 25th, and then a public hearing on June 15th. And then I will also just quickly pull up this slide, which is the 2-year budget process. And so once again, we're in this February to April period developing the budget. We make the budget available in April, the workshops in May, and then we go to the council and to the community for the public hearing and budget adoption in June. So hopefully that's what you're.
Christina, I think I got additional information in response to Fran's question. Thank you to our CEO Gilroy, esteemed finance director. The WaterSmart actually shows the unit in gallons. So it's like I mentioned, it's up to the hour. So and for each week we bill our residents based on 100 cubic feet, and each 100 cubic feet is about 748 gallons. So up to the hours in the WaterSmart, you can use that and divide by 748. That will give you the approximate water unit or 100 cubic feet. Thank you, Harjo, our esteemed financial director, City Gilroy.
Wow, that just makes me feel really good. I mean, that just shows the partnership between Gilroy and Morgan Hill, especially previously coming from the city of Gilroy for me, Harjo, who left us, but left us for a neighboring city of Gilroy. Thank you, Harjo. That means a lot.
Christina, if I could just add to that answer, I think one thing that'd be good for the residents to realize is you say you're going between 10 and 11 units, and if I heard Fran correctly, she might want to stop before she gets to the 11 units. It's not as if before you get to the 11 units, you're going to save, because you still have the same amount of water use that's going to carry over for the next month, because you're going to be billed for all your water use, whether you get to that unit or not.
Okay, and Fran, if you have follow-up questions, feel free to raise your hand again, or just follow up via email. Either way, happy to answer more questions. Mike put a comment in there. Thanks for the presentation. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate that. Okay. Not seeing anything in the Q&A. Anybody that's calling in or on, if you want to raise your hand. Okay, well, I want to thank the members of the public, our community that's joined us. We are very available. Reach out to us if you want to talk about the budget, if you want to understand the budget better, if you want to provide us input, your thoughts, happy to hear them. You can reach out to Dat, you can reach out to our clerk, to Monica, to myself, and we would be happy to engage with you. We do hope that you continue to participate and come to our community meeting, our council meetings, and so forth. So with that, thank you. Have a great rest of the evening. Take care, everybody.